Hey everybody, my name is Taylor Glenn, and this is my channel Taylor Tries, where I try new things and I try to teach you new things. And today, I'm going to try to teach you how to juggle 4 clubs. Before we get started, big thank you to everyone who is a member of my Otter Club on Patreon. This tutorial is free for everyone else because of you. I really appreciate it, and I hope they do too. As members of my Patreon, you get extended versions of many of my tutorials, including this one. In the extended version of this tutorial, I'll teach you not only how to juggle 4 clubs, but also how to do a fancy ending where you end in a scissor catch and impress all of the people who are watching you juggle. For only $2, you get access to that and all of my other extended tutorials, and it helps me out. There's a link in the description if you want to do that. First, prerequisites. 4 clubs is a difficult trick. I know a lot of jugglers who have been working on 4 clubs for years and still can't do it. Now, I'm not saying that to discourage you or freak you out. I really think that you'll be able to learn 4 clubs. And I think with the tips and advice that I'm gonna give you in this tutorial, it will make that learning process a lot easier and faster. But I think it's important going in that you know that it's a difficult trick and you're probably going to drop a lot. That's okay. Learning 4 clubs can be really frustrating. Be patient, be kind to yourself, and try to enjoy the process, even if you're dropping a lot. Since 4 clubs is a difficult pattern, I recommend that you know these tricks already. You should be really comfortable juggling 3. I mean, like, so comfortable. It's so easy for you. When you do 4 clubs, you usually do them in double spins. It's the easiest way to do the trick, so you should be really comfortable doing double spins with 3, which I cover in another tutorial. There's a link in the description if you haven't worked on those. I also recommend being comfortable with the 4-2-3, where the 4s are double spins, and ideally 4-4-1, again, where those 4s are double spins. If you don't know those tricks, I'm going to briefly touch on them in this tutorial because they are very helpful exercises for learning 4 clubs, but I do highly recommend that you just practice those on their own and get really comfortable with them. You also need to be comfortable with 4 balls, the 4-ball fountain specifically. I know some jugglers really don't like balls and they just try to learn everything with clubs, but really, it's so much easier with balls. Typically, when we juggle 4 objects, we are juggling in the fountain pattern. If you learned 4 balls, that's most likely how you did it. So let's take a closer look at what's happening when we juggle 4. Because it's a fountain pattern, we are juggling 2 clubs in each hand. The most common way to do this with clubs is to use double spins. That is where the clubs are rotating twice before you catch them again. I have met some jugglers who have better luck doing the 4-club fountain in single spins, but I would say that's a very small minority. Most people are far more comfortable doing 4 clubs with double spins, myself included. We're gonna do 1 club. Now let's think about what we're trying to achieve with this. Most people, if you tell them to throw a club up to the same hand, they'll do this, and it'll be fine. But that's not quite a fountain throw. When we do a fountain throw, we want the club to come in a little bit and then out a little bit, so it creates a long, skinny oval. That's what a fountain throw looks like. That's really hard to do with a club because there's all these pivot points that can go wrong. So if we think, how do we get a club to come in and then out? So we're gonna come in to throw just a little bit. I don't want it thrown from here. It's not, but we're not gonna throw it from our shoulder either. We're gonna come a little bit in. Now, if you just try to do that and go like that, the club might go straight up because we let go of it here, so it will probably go there. Now we understand the problem of fountain throws. We do want to come in with it, but we need to somehow get the club to go back out. A lot of people, when they learn, they try to achieve that direction by sort of pulling the club back. The problem is, when we do that, we often end up coming a little too far out with it, and we end up catching the club hitting our arm. If you've already tried to learn 4, you'll know that that's very common to get these marks on your arm. So the way we fix that is to play around with that horizontal direction of the club, which we never had to think about before with 3. So this is new for a lot of people. You can turn the top of the club, just turn it out just a little bit, little tiny sliver. What I don't want you to do is move your arm. We're not keeping our arm attached to the club like it's like a robot. It's almost like you're pushing your wrist out a tad. It's not a lot. You can't even see it for the most part, but you can feel it. You throw the club straight, the club is gonna come down straight, and that's when it's gonna hit you in the arm. If we tilt this club out a little bit while still keeping our arm in the same spot, we're not moving it, we end up giving that club a little bit of that directional oval without having to get wide with our arms. And it also creates room for those knobs so you're not hitting it when it comes down. The other thing I want you to pay attention to are your elbows. We don't want to be doing this. You might have done that with 3. That's a bad habit. start trying to bring those in general with every juggling pattern you do. The other important thing is bringing your arms down. A lot of people, when they juggle 3, they're comfortable juggling pretty high. When you start juggling 4 clubs, having that extra space, it gives you more time, makes it feel a little slower. So when you're practicing 1 club, get in the habit of thinking about all those things. We want to keep our elbows in. We want to use our elbow as the pivot point and use our wrist to control that direction. And then you want to bring the club down. It doesn't have to touch your leg, but you want to bring it down more than you might be comfortable with 3. That's a lot of stuff. Let's just try 1 club. So here, out a little bit, and when you're releasing it, you're sort of following through a little bit with the edge of your hand. And when you're catching that club, you're gonna catch it here. If you're catching it out and you're having to reach out, that means you're either throwing it too much or your angle is off. We basically want to catch it where we start. Then we come down and we throw it again. Down, up, down, up. Now play around with that a lot. Get comfortable with understanding that pivot point. It can be hard to understand quite what I'm talking about until you practice it. And the best thing to look out for is if you're throwing and the club is coming down straight, you need to curve it out just a little bit more, and especially when you're letting go. You might be curved at the beginning, but then when you're letting go, you're bringing it in again. Down, up, catch, down, up, catch. And of course, work on it with the other hand. Cool, now that I've beaten you over the head with 1 club, let's do 2 clubs. All right, I know what you're thinking, 2 in 1 hand. No, we're not doing that yet. We're going to do both sides. I know, it's not as fun. Deal with it. Juggling 4 clubs is hard. Got to put in that work. Now we're gonna do what we just did, but we're gonna do it on both sides. 1, 2. And as we do all of these exercises, do not start losing your form. Keep your elbows in. We want to come down and up with that slight angle and follow through and releasing from inside of our shoulder. 1, 2. Now we can speed it up. We can do it with the rhythm that we're gonna do the first 2 throws. Boom, boom. Try to keep that form. 1, 2. This is a really good time to start figuring out that distance. When you first start, you might be a little wider. It's gonna be harder to maintain. You gotta bring them in. You gotta get comfortable getting close. And then start with the other side. 1, 2. Then the other one, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I can feel myself with my left hand starting to get that habit where it's coming down straight. And what that means is I need to pivot it more and throw more that way. I ideally want the knobs to always be facing me. If the knobs start coming out to where they're over there, it's gonna be hard and you're gonna hit yourself in the arm. So we really want this pivot point instead of this. And again, that comes from throwing with your wrist sort of pushing out a little bit. But seriously, I'm not telling you to throw like this, because that's wrong too. It's just that we don't want to throw straight, and especially not with them curving in, which is what I used to do and what a lot of people do. But as you do this, it's important to think about all these techniques. If you're just doing this, then it doesn't, there's no, you just don't do that. But if you really want to get those throws down, keep all those things in mind. Right, left, right. Okay, now let's try the exercise where we do 2 in 1 hand. Oh my gosh, exciting. Let's start with our dominant hand. Whatever grip you feel comfortable with, you should be good releasing 1 club because you did that with 3. I've noticed that a lot of people will hold that second club a little further down so that they end up being like this. That can make it a little easier to release that first club if you have a hard time with it. Now we're gonna do 2 throws in a row, but we gotta keep all of those things in mind. 1, 2, catch. And when you do this, I really want you to pay attention to how wide you are. If you're coming out here, just inside your shoulder is where you should be releasing it, and it should be framing your shoulder. So 1, 2. And especially when you're releasing, you gotta come in, because you're gonna wanna go like that, and they're gonna hit, or you're gonna get wide with it. You wanna catch here, but throw here. Now from there, you can try to get more and more catches as you feel comfortable, but keeping that form. 1, 2, 3, catch. Then you can do 4. This is also a good time to pay attention to if you're bringing them down. You might start doing this. It's just not, don't come up with it. Let the club come down. Okay, let's go to our non-dominant hand. The first thing you gotta get comfortable with is holding 2 in that hand, because let's be honest, a lot of us only ever did that with our dominant hand, and we only ever started 3 like that. You typically hold it the same way you do in the other side. If you're using standard grip versus circus grip, you're probably the same grip on the other side, but see what's comfortable. Like I said with the other hand, if you have a hard time holding them at their normal spot, you can hold this one even further down. That can make that first club a little easier to release, especially in your non-dominant hand. And if you've never done this and you just freak out, just practice the first club. Don't try to run it yet. Once you feel okay with releasing one, we can try 2 throws. 1, 2. And so yeah, I'd say just drill each side a bunch, keeping all those form things in mind, getting comfortable with it. You do not have to be perfect at it. I'm not saying you have to get 100 catches, because that's no fun. If you're pretty consistent with each hand, now we can work on 3. I talked about these in the prerequisites. We're not gonna spend a lot of time on them, but I wanna point out these helpful 3 club drills that will be great practice for doing 4 clubs. 4, 2, 3. If you don't know 4, 2, 3, it's a sight swap. As of right now, I have a ball tutorial on how to do it, which can be really helpful to do it with clubs. It's the same idea, except for the 4 is gonna be a double spin, and the 3 will be a single spin. The whole point of practicing that is to get those 4s, those double spins, to feel like 4 clubs. So that's a really good trick for perfecting releasing from inside of our shoulder, but releasing with that slight angle. And try to keep those 4s pretty close together. You know, we don't wanna do this, because that's not how we're gonna juggle 4. Another thing that can help with that is when you do the 3, do it a little loftier than you normally do. You don't wanna do this, like a really low 3. That single spin needs to be a little higher. All the same things apply if you're working on 4-4-1, which is a really fun club trick. I recommend learning 4-4-1 with balls first. When you do it with clubs, it's just gonna be double, double, and then 1 across. And that 1 across is just a hand like that. So it's double, double, 1 across. And you can stop, or you can keep going. 4-4-1 is really good for getting those 4s the same height. And again, working on that angle. It will show a lot of your bad habits. The last exercise with 3 clubs, throw all of these clubs up with a hole in one of your hands. And you should alternate 1, 2, 3. And again, keeping all those things in mind, don't be doing this. That's not right. 1, 2, 3. And you can keep going with it. Then you can work on the other side, which is usually harder with your non-dominant hand. 1, 2, 3. Especially recommend that exercise if you have a hard time releasing that club with your non-dominant hand, and if your heights are all wonky. It's a good way to just drill those in and get them the right height. It's a lot of stuff, isn't it? Yeah, 4 clubs is tough. It's a tough trick. 4 clubs, you don't need 2 different colors. I just have different colors because they're adorable. It's gonna be all those things that we just did, but now we do them at the same time. Most important things, we want them to be closer than you think they're gonna be. It's not this, it's too wide. Your inside needs to be inside your shoulders. Right inside that bone on your shoulder, that's where you want it to be. So we're gonna release there and slightly out with our elbows in. We're gonna do a flash, 4 throws. 1, 2, 3, 4. troubleshooting. I pretty much covered most of the things that you should be avoiding throughout the tutorial, but just to reiterate them, the #1 most common problem for people learning 4 clubs is that that knob is coming down and hitting them in the arm. It's painful. It's also just a sign that you're doing something wrong. There are 3 main things that I think will fix that problem. Coming in with your arm when you throw, so throwing more from the inside of your shoulder and not from shoulder width or outside, then your pattern's gonna get wide and you're gonna end up catching like this, which is gonna hit that arm. The second is when you're coming in, remembering to tilt out just a little bit and especially sort of push up with your wrist so that it continues with that direction, and then that way it will come in facing you and not out like that. Because if the club is pointing towards you when you catch it, it will not be pointing towards your wrist. The third thing that will definitely help with that, and is why I and many other jugglers do it, is catching a little bit lower down. So you might normally catch 3 up here, get in the habit of catching 4 a little bit lower. When you do that, makes it so that the knob isn't there enough to come down and hit you in the arm. Some jugglers I've noticed will catch a little higher and then slide down for the throw, and that comes, I think, with that height control. The lower down you're holding on the club, typically the higher it will go without needing additional spin. Second most common problem, I would say, is different heights. Your right hand might be higher than your left hand or vice versa. So really, just try to keep that timing the same, even though the hands are separate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're at this level of juggling, you should really be comfortable with, or start getting comfortable with, correcting one hand intentionally. If you're noticing that your left hand is always lower, start focusing on that hand and getting it higher. That will fix the problem. 4 clubs especially, your hands are gonna be doing different things with heights and spins, so you really gotta get comfortable being able to isolate the problem with each hand. And I would say the best 3 club exercise for improving those matching heights would be that 3-up with that missing club. Other common problem is overspinning or underspinning the clubs. And this is connected to being too low and being too high. There's a ratio between how high you throw the club and how much it spins. You can throw a double spin low or high, but most of us, when we throw a double, there will be a comfortable height where we're not having to put too much effort into controlling the spin, and the club will naturally do its thing. That's ideally where you want to be doing your 4 clubs. But it's really common for you to start kind of freaking out. Doing all the drills will help you with that. And I would say especially working on 2 in each hand is a great way for just getting comfortable with that height and those spins with each hand. If you find yourself lifting up to catch, probably because you're overspinning. You gotta slow that spin down a little bit. Again, come down with your arms, nice lofty throws. We really wanna take our time with 4 clubs. The faster and lower you throw those doubles, the more chaotic it's gonna be, the harder it will be to control and to correct mistakes, and you're putting a lot of stress on your wrists, which is why I also emphasize coming down with it. Doing 4 clubs is tiring. Very hard. It's hard on your shoulders and it's hard on your wrists. So we want to try to minimize that impact by using the full range of our arm, by coming down with it. When we do that, we're taking some of that pressure off of our wrist and using our bicep, which is a much stronger muscle than our wrist muscles. And then we're using that wrist to control a little bit of that spin and that angle, instead of using it to propel the club up. And then when we catch our club, we're gonna come down with it. A lot of people, when they work on 4, they're not only throwing up here, they're catching up here and then kind of trying to stay in this range. It puts so much strain on your wrist. Don't do it. It's gonna give you carpal tunnel. But I know that I did that a lot when I first started. You can get away with it with 3, but with 4, you're gonna end up causing some pain. So really get comfortable bringing those arms down. So when we're throwing, we come down, throw from more of the middle, and then when we catch, cradling that catch a little more so you don't put impact on your wrist. One of the other common issues that almost everyone has when they first learn 4 clubs is having those clubs collide. And there are a couple different reasons that can be happening. It depends on which clubs are colliding. If you're noticing that the right and the left hand clubs are colliding like that, that usually means you're either throwing straight up, straight forward like that, and they're hitting each other, or even inward, so they're kind of going in. You gotta remember to come out just a little bit and sort of push up so that it aims with that slight angle like that. That way they won't hit each other. Or if you find that the same hand is colliding, like that, it's the most common issue I normally have. When it starts happening to me, what I always try to do is make sure that I'm throwing from inside my shoulder. A lot of the time when those collisions happen, it's because we're not coming in enough and we're trying to throw in line with where the catch is gonna be. So if we throw the club here and it comes down here, but then we try to throw in that line, they're gonna collide. We really wanna throw in from inside our shoulder so that the club coming down is coming just outside of our shoulder and they are both in their respective spot. The other thing I always try to pay attention to when that starts happening is that slight angle. Because if that angle is not right, I'm probably gonna be catching at a weird angle, which makes my throw harder to do and can end up causing collisions. Or I'll be pointing forward and throwing the club straight up, which will not make it go out and it'll cause a collision. So I always try to make sure I'm coming in and I'm trying to create that slight off angle and push, following through with my wrist and my fingers so that it keeps that angle and creates that nice oval. Other problems that are common with all of juggling that you might be having is if you're either reaching out like this and even walking forward, or you're pulling the club back. I'd say the back one is more common with 4 clubs. Usually when that happens, it's because you're using too much wrist. You're maybe hunching up a little bit and throwing from up here. And if you're doing that, you're gonna put more wrist in it and it might pull it back. So again, remember to come down and then up, down and up. And when we do that, we really wanna follow through with our arm. We want to come up with it. So you don't wanna flick it because then you're using all wrist. So we wanna use that arm, come down and up. If you're throwing them forward, it usually comes with releasing a little too soon. You're not using enough of that wrist. So, you might be letting go a little too soon. It's a fine balance. You gotta pull up with your arm. You gotta follow through with that arm and those fingers and release when it's like here, boom. It's a lot, right? It's a lot. 4 clubs is tough. It's a lot. But I hope that all of these tips get you started in the right direction. I hope it doesn't take you as long as it took me because you have these tips. If you're thinking to yourself, why didn't you cover 4 clubs synchronous fountain, where throwing at the same time? It's because in my opinion, it's much harder. I would really focus on learning 4 club async fountain first. You're gonna have more fun with it. It's a lot easier, and the sync fountain's just terrible. So I will probably cover that in a different tutorial and give you my advice on it. But really, for now, just focus on the async. So that is all I have for you today. If you found this tutorial helpful, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you really want to help me out, you can join my Otter Club on Patreon for only $2. It adds up a lot and it keeps these tutorials free for everybody. Plus you get access to the extended version of this tutorial where I'm gonna teach you how to end your 4 club fountain in a scissor catch, and it's just gonna be a good time. You can get access to that and all of the other extended tutorials instantly for $2. There's a link in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. So loud. Does anyone else feel like my hair is just extra weird today? It just looks very flat. Get some oomph, hair. That's what I get for taking showers. Or if you're like me, hate clubs. Hate them. You'll find yourself, God, really? I've got all these marks on my arm from doing the bad troubleshooting part. Lesson learned. Next time I'll film that at the end and the talking part at the beginning. Smart, Taylor.